In the den of iniquity, vicinity no pretty, calamity fi hit we any moment, what a pity. Tomorrow never certain, what dwells behind the curtain, the face of evil lurking, with that shifty eyes averting. It's not a steady bubble, that either pop or topple, many will fall and stumble, let the dozers gather rubble. From LA to Colorado, Guinea to Burkina Faso, cannons could breach the towers and the troops will storm the castle. I say, run, run, come, make we get it. Because the peace that is bestowed upon the meek is overrated. So run, run, come, make we get it. Calling all your daughters and your sons, we come forget it. I say, run, run, come, make we get it. Because the peace that is bestowed upon the meek is overrated. Lord, run, run, come, make we get it. Calling all your daughters and your sons, we come forget it. With the rubble steady rising and hearts are compromising. rising. Convictions here are stifling, making evil appetizing. The fists are steady forming, and countenance is falling. Defenses are withdrawing, possibilities are falling. In these circumstances, evil will make advances. Pick up your sword and lances, and be sure to take your stances. Victory is never promised. The battle is upon us. Gather the brave and honest, and the righteous in your corners.
Hello. Greetings, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Ike. Welcome to my channel. Let's get one thing out of the way. Let's click that like button. Click that subscribe button twice. Like, subscribe, hit the bell button twice. Ladies and gentlemen, today we're going to be talking about modern racism through the lens of one Jussie Smollett. Yes, the recently sentenced to 150 days in Cook County Jail, Jussie Smollett. How are we all doing, by the way? How are we all doing this beautiful evening? Okay, so let's get right to this, okay? To remind ourselves, to refresh our memory as to the Jussie Smollett situation. Well, Jussie is going to be about 40 years old this year because he was born in 1982. He's an American actor and singer, born 1982. Okay, most recently acclaimed for his performance as Jamal, okay? Jamal in the Fox drama Empire. He plays Jamal. And Jamal is, I believe, a gay singer in the show. And somebody may correct me, but I think that the role was seen as groundbreaking for a positive depiction of Black gay man on television, right? And if that be the case, ladies and gentlemen, then how come we hear of these things such as him being sentenced? Well, basically that's because in 2019, he staged a hate crime hoax. Okay? He staged a fake crime. Now, let's remind ourselves of what that was all about, too, right? Maybe we can share something here. So remember the Nigerians, right? On January 29th, 2019, Jussie Smollett reported to the Chicago Police Department that a hate crime had occurred. It turns out that he had earlier on staged that hate crime with two Nigerian brothers, Abimbola and Olabinjo. Abimbola and Olabinjo Oshundairo. Those are real Yoruba brothers right there. Okay. He said that he was attacked by rope wielding, MAGA hat wearing white males whom said this is MAGA country and whatnot in the middle of the night. Pretty cold. They were waiting there with bleach for him, right? They had bleach and everything. So it turns out that the cops were able to out them. On February the 13th, 2019, Chicago police raided the home of the Oshundairo brothers and found records indicating that they had been paid. They were paid $3,500 in order to stage this hoax hate crime with our friend here, Jussie. Jussie Smollett in the building. So, us Nigerians got to get ourselves involved in whatever shadiness is going on. Wherever the shadiness of our times, we're there trying to find out what we can get out of it. So this is the situation. Born 1982, going to turn 40 today. Had this role that was critically acclaimed, a role as Jamal in the Fox show Empire. And then staged this hate crime with our Nigerian brothers here. The question that immediately comes to mind is why? And in asking that question, and answering of the question, we're going to run up against the question of how many hate crimes are actually hoaxes then? What percentage of the hate crimes that you hear when somebody claims that they have been hounded in one way or the other for some ism or phobe, racism, sexism, xenophobia, homophobia, whatever it may be, what percentage is a hoax? Is it something that only happens in the media? Is it only the big stories that have a particular percentage? Because it's not something that is uncommon. In asking why, we must immediately notice that this is a phenomenon in and of itself, regardless of whom the perpetrator is, regardless of the identity of Jussie Smollett in this case. Right? Is anyone willing to put a percentage on the table? So let's consider this. Let's consider that question, okay? Because I think it's an important question as to the why. Getting to the why, we have to look at what exactly the data says. And there is a man called Wilfred Riley, and he wrote a book called Hate Crime Hoax, I believe. Okay. And I think we're going to go ahead and try to review a little bit of that just to get a feel for the data as to what is the percentage of the hate crimes that are reported that are hoaxes. What is the flavor for the kinds of things that people tend to fake? Okay. The kinds of stories people tend to fake. We know of this thing called the Munchausen syndrome, which is something people do. Okay. It's a kind of a psychological condition, if you will. What is the Munchausen syndrome? It is named after this old general, Munchausen, whom used to always make up stories. He would always make up stories about he did this and he did that in order to get attention. So Munchausen syndrome in particular is when people cause harm to themselves and others in order to, so sometimes mothers will harm their babies, sometimes people will harm themselves, or they will be hypochondriacs and complain about things that don't really exist just to get the attention. Now, that is a fact that people do that kind of stuff. But using the racial narrative, what are the numbers on that? What is a feel for the numbers with regards to that? So hopefully I can get the audio here on this. I got Glenn Lowry, fair use, and he's interviewing the writer of Hate Crime Hoax.
Hello there, Wilfred Riley. How you doing?
Doing well. How are you today?
I'm doing very well. Glenn Lowry here at The Glenn Show, bloggingheads.tv. I'm professor of economics and the social sciences at Brown University. And I'm speaking with Wilfred Riley, who's associate professor of political science at Kentucky State University. And I'm very happy to welcome you to The Glenn Show, Will.
Oh, Glenn, I'm glad to be on. Been a fan of your work for a while, in fact.
Have you? Okay, well, we will want to hear more about that. Let me just say for the record that The Glenn Show is sponsored by the Watson Institute for International and Public Affairs here at Brown, a very fine institution with which I'm associated. All right, so we've got Wilfred Riley here. He is the author of a new book. The book is called Hoax: How the Mass Media Misreports Hate Crimes and Sells a Fake Race War to the American
mass media, misreporting hate crimes, selling they say, a fake race war to America. Well, you know that somebody in media would want to sell some kind of war is not, it's not some kind of a crazy idea. It makes sense. If it bleeds, it leads. Drama. So why not fake it and sell it? We know that they do lie, especially given recent events. You cannot consider the happenings in 2020, 2021, and not immediately be reminded of the fact that these organs of sense making do lie, right? So, anyways, let's continue. The book is called The Race Hoax, okay? Or Hate Crime Hoax, or The Hoax, or something like that. Anyways, go on.
Media misreports hate crimes and sells a fake race war to the American people. That's a provocative title, especially in the aftermath of the Jussie Smollett case that played itself out in Chicago not long ago that everybody in the world has heard about. I'm just curious of how it is that you came to.
And can I get a 1 in the chat if you guys hear the video? Because I didn't quite check. Sharing this video, Glenn Lowry. If you guys hear it, please let me get a 1 in the chat. Thank you very much.
Came to take this issue up with the benefit of your scholarly expertise and so on.
All right. Yeah, the book is Hate Crime Hoax, subtitle, as you've described. And the way that I became interested in the phenomenon of hoax hate crimes was actually fairly personal. So I am, as I hear you are, from Chicago.
I am from Chicago, south side of Chicago, Park Manor, 73rd and Michigan Avenue near the Dan Ryan Expressway. Graduated high school, 19.
All right, he's putting it down. He's putting it on wax.
1965. 1965, Will.
All right.
Yeah, I'm from Chicago. It's a different Chicago than the one that you're from, but I'm from Chicago.
Still the same city in a lot of ways. I was born on the north side near Ashland and Division, lived on the south side, Bridgeport. I have family down there in Inglewood. I actually, for athletic and academic reasons, went about 20 miles outside the city for high school. So I graduated from East Aurora Senior in the second largest city in the state. But yeah, Chicago. And that's very relevant to my interest in hoax hate crimes, because as you may recall, in 2012, Velvet Rope Ultra Lounge, which was one of kind of the well-known sort of hipster bar venues in the city, very gay-friendly, a lot of graduate students went there, burnt to the ground. I had probably 15 friends that used to go there and dance. And there were, terrible anti-gay epithets written throughout the building. It was
interesting. Never heard of this one, but a building burned to the ground with gay epithets written in there. And then, okay. And then, is it going to be an insurance thing? Is it going to be an insurance thing? Is it the owner that burnt it and then claimed hate crime to get the insurance money? But again, the idea of the fact that it is not uncommon for incidents like this to be faked. So how much of it? See here.
It was very obvious that an accelerant, a gasoline or something like that had been used to set the building ablaze. So the Tribune focused very heavily on this story, as you can imagine, for days at first, and then updates on the case for a period of weeks. And I obviously followed this story closely. And in this period from, say, 2012 to 2014, I became aware of a number of other cases like this in very specifically the upper Midwest. So at the University of Chicago, it's our most prestigious educational institution, although Northwestern folks might quibble. There was a claim that a campus activist had his Facebook page hacked, and he had been threatened by a group of conservatives who he called the U Chicago Electronic Army. He presented this as a mass movement with rape, on one occasion, I believe, with death. This guy's name was Derek Cockaleen, another front page Tribune story. At Grand Valley State, just up the road, as you move into Michigan, there was the claim that on the first day of Black History Month, a young woman had the whiteboard that college kids have in their rooms defaced. I would assume after a break-in, someone had written, "Go home, you black bee." Delete Black History Month. Martin Luther King was an N-word. All this offensive stuff. The most ridiculous case took place
Good stuff.
at Michigan Tech, where a student named Matt Schultz was initially arrested on terrorism charges following the claim that he had threatened to shoot every black student on campus. So a lot of books have sort of a made-up backstory. This has a real backstory. I was a graduate student. I was involved in the community when these high-profile front-page hate crime stories involving students in the area were taking place, and I followed them. And it turned out that all of them were fakes. In the Velvet Rope case, this became regional, if not national news. It turned out that the owner, a guy named Frank Elliott, just owed a bunch of people money. Not always the best idea in Chicago. So he burnt his own business to the ground and apparently wrote the epithets himself.
Okay, that one I guess I saw coming a mile away. We probably all saw it coming a mile away. Okay, so the guy's getting into his book and he's talking about these hoaxes, these hate crime hoaxes, and that the motivations perhaps are more than what we've already considered. We considered Munchausen syndrome, right? Just some kind of a psychological defect, and then generally is associated with the seeking of attention. One could talk about social media, for example, and the pressures that it puts upon us now, even more so because of the opportunities that it has for people to make it big and get their 15 minutes of fame, sometimes maybe even 15 days of fame, right? But their financial incentives as well. Okay. I didn't even think about that one before. And if you look at the Jussie Smollett case, as a matter of fact, it could be argued that he had financial motivations. Could he not be thinking, hey, my particular role in this Empire series is critically acclaimed. Okay, maybe I can get more screen time. Maybe I can be more of a household name. Maybe I can solidify my cachet out there in the marketplace by having this hoax happen, right? I'm kind of hot right now, but I'm not getting the. I can get more screen time, more money, more notoriety. Isn't that a possible motivation on his part? What do you think was, the motivate? What are the motivations of a Jussie Smollett type? Was it psychologically just damage, attention for perhaps for profit, or another aspect is that he wants to be an activist? Because I know he has a African American mom and a Jewish father, and I believe within their family is some activism and activist roots. But how are you going to be activist in a modern day whereby the issues are more psychological and subtle? The issues are about microaggression and white privilege. Okay. The issue is about guilt. So being subtle and playing the postmodern dance of oppression Olympics and all that kind of stuff is the way to be an activist today. And that's just that's hard work. It's hard work to contort yourself into those funny shapes. And he's like, you know what? I want to be somebody. He did say that he is the gay Tupac, right? So the idea that he would want some kind of activist bona fides, if you will, some activist street cred, if you will, is not something that is strange because he carries himself that way, right? He wants to be a certain kind of gay Tupac. However, how do you do that these days? It's too complicated. You can't just so he tried something rather blatant and silly. middle of winter, I believe, Chicago, cold, getting the subway. You were out just getting the subway, and there were these people wearing MAGA hats saying this is MAGA country, and they had rope and bleach. That's the kicker right there. Shout out. Let's recognize my manners. My manners. Where are my manners? Let me recognize the super chats in the building. Thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you. Thank you, thank you, thank you very much, K Polymath, for the 200 Kenyan shillings, I believe, or something of that. What is that? $2? But thank you very much. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. He says, "Don't be dusty, black man, and donate." He's asking you to donate, by the way. Yes, the super chat button does work. We also take Cash App, by the way. Okay, and let's see what else is going on here. Let's see what else is going on here. What are the possible motivations? Is the stage of the game we're still in? What are the possible motivations? Again, not born 1982, now in 2022, as he turns 40, being sentenced to 150 days in jail in Cook County. How did that come to be? What are the possible motivations? We looked at the fact, and we're going to continue with this video as well. Okay, written by Mr. Riley, looking at the hate crime hoaxes, the motivations for them. How widespread are they? How about when these things actually go to court? What is uncovered in court? What is the conviction rate of hate crime claims, let's say? Those guys that do the insurance thing, for example, how often is that uncovered in some kind of judicial proceeding, right? What are the numbers on this stuff? These are important questions. In order to understand the reality of the environment that we are indeed in. Ain't that right? So I think I like what he's saying so far, but perhaps we can get a little bit more quantitative because he's given examples. I like his example of the insurance thing. And then he gave examples of like dormitories and stuff like that. Is this something that happens at work, for example? Because along with this same kind of complaint could be you can almost put Me Too as a parallel to this aspect. Are there Me Too hoaxes out there as well? They are quite parallel. They are allegations of crime based on a particular identity. In this case, there's going to be some gender and power situation going on, right? Or it's a white nationalist and MAGA hat wearing, bleach wielding white guy in the middle of night in the cold with rope. Shout out to you. So let's see if we can get some numbers out here. Okay. 1%. Let's see. Well, let's just play it.
All this came out not as the result of investigative reporting or even police work, but as the result of an insurance audit into the business when they were deciding how much to compensate him. It turned out
just like I thought, right? So if the judicial proceedings don't happen, if people, or in this case, like an insurance hearing, if lawyers don't get in the room and start looking, right, some will just go by. But what gets uncovered when crimes get reported or insurance claims get made, and these crimes have to do with hate crime? These insurance claims have to do with hate crime related incidents that led to the loss of property or life or whatever it may be, right? What gets uncovered? Is it like 5% of the cases are, found to be hoaxes, 10%, 15%? What are the numbers on that? And that'll be key to understanding what's going on out there. Okay. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Please like the video, share the video. That means share on your Facebook, on your WhatsApp group, on your text group. If you have a YouTube channel, in your community tab, share, like, subscribe, hit the bell button, all that good stuff. So let's continue here with this and see where he goes.
That he had been tens of thousands of dollars in debt. A friend of his who had been rounded up on a felony drunken driving charge turned state's evidence, detailed a lot of what had gone on there. As I recall, he went to prison briefly, but by the time all this happened, Mr. Elliott had already held a major fundraiser at another trendy bar in Chicago and raised enough money to open a third trendy bar in Chicago called Bonsai, which, as I understand, is still there, still in the city. So that's what happened with that case. And all of the rest collapsed. I mean, without rambling on, Derek Cockaleen said...
I think I didn't want to interrupt you, but I think I've got the picture. You were affected by discovering that a number of incidents that had been reported, I assume with some fanfare in the press, as violations of people of color.
A number of incidents, right? So he has reported some, what one may call anecdotes here. And by the way, I think this is another one of those terms that is half understood, right? I'm not going to spend too much time on it, but it's a tangent, and maybe I'll make a video separate about another one of these dichotomies, like the idea of data versus anecdote and what the difference is. And I think that the nature of the difference is in that one is an individual and the other is a group. In other words, there is no such thing as individual data. Data means something when you've put it in a bucket, when it's a collection of something, right? Otherwise, if you look at the individual level, every data point is an anecdote. So when I start giving you anecdotes and you say, oh, it's just anecdotes, well, that's true. But if it's for part of an aggregate form or like part of a list, then that's data. So data has to be group, data has to be list, data has to be the aggregate thing, blah, blah, blah. The implications of what I just said and the misunderstandings and the supposed understandings of it are numerous. And I think that we can talk about that some other day. But he's talking about the fact that, you've talked about a few incidents, especially, I'm sure, incidents that made it out there in the media. And you're saying this is an example of the hoaxes that are out there, of the hate crime hoaxes out there, of which Jussie Smollett has been convicted and sentenced today 150 days in a Cook County jail. Okay, but how about the data? How about the group stuff? Let's see.
African Americans as hate crimes turned out to be untrue, and that sent you on the path that has resulted in this book. And I want to hear more about the extent, because these are anecdotes that you've told. I assume that you've made an effort to do a systematic assessment of the extent of this thing. But the main question that I want to ask you, and I know a lot of people will be thinking this, is, okay, you can name a number of instances in which people have faked, like Jussie Smollett did, stuff happening to them. That doesn't mean that there's not hate or that there aren't hate crimes. And it would appear that you want us to somehow reduce our vigilance about this problem. I don't want to put words in your mouth, and I don't want to impute motives to you, but I'm saying, if indeed we're talking about mass media misreporting hate crimes and selling a fake race war, you want to reorient our concerns about the things that actually endanger African Americans, or Jews, or Muslims, or other groups that might be the subject of this hate crime. And why should we ratchet down our alertness, back off a little bit from our concern about these matters, just because there exist a few instances like the one of Jussie Smollett that turned out to be phony?
All right, so he restated the point, the point which we knew he was going to get to, which is basically, hey, these are nice anecdotes, okay? And these anecdotes might be actually individual data points in a data set, right? But show me the data set, right, that you speak of. From whence come these anecdotes. Okay, so if you take, for example, the D91 DVOC and the shot, right? Whether you get the shot or not for the 91 DVOC, okay? And people talking about having certain kinds of experiences, adverse effects from taking the shot or not, right? And there's been many arguments about, well, that's just anecdote and this is not data yet. The point is, when you hear someone give you an anecdote, your disposition as a person of who seeks truth, let's say, is to try to make it data, is to try to collect it, is to try to say, okay, cool. So you are this particular type of person in this age and you grew up in this place. In other words, to compile it, to put it in a group, put it in a bucket, to take it and make it incorporated into your data. Is not so that it should be the challenge for you, not to tell them, oh, you're just an anecdote. It's like, well, no. Well, if this is an anecdote, you make them data by particularizing them with whichever parameter boxes you want to put around them, with particular things you would like to know about them so that you put them in the correct places. Okay? As I just said, male may be important, where they grew up may be important, age may be important, all those kinds of things may be important. Make them data. Okay. But anyways, I digress again. But he's making that point about where the data is. So let's continue with this video about where the data on hate crime hoaxes are.
Well, Dr. Lowry, Glenn, I mean, it's not a few incidents. I mean, to some extent, I think obviously both of us are against real hate. Both of us are against real racism. You, to some extent, I don't know. At any rate, it's not a few incidents. Putting together the book, I used basic tools of scholastic analysis, from analyzing Google in depth to going to pre-existing websites to compiling data in Stata to put together what I want to eventually be a master list of these hate crime hoaxes. At the time that I published the book Hate Crime Hoax, I had 409 hoax hate incidents. That's currently up to 618. I believe I sent this data set over to you.
You did, and I took a look at it, and it's extensive, no doubt about it.
Yeah, I think it's fairly well done. Obviously, there's always room for vetting with a data set like that. But I mean, you have to understand in context, and I think you do, that there are only about 7,000 reported actual hate crimes, felony or A misdemeanor, B misdemeanor, bias attacks in a typical year.
7,000 hate crimes a year in the United States, in Chicago. In the United States, it would seem that is what he just said. 7,000. So he's getting down to some numbers now. He spoke of the data set. He said he collated some stuff. He sent it to Glenn Lowry. Glenn Lowry said, hey, your data was extensive. Okay. Now he's going to say, okay, cool. Let's look at 7,000, what is actually reported. And let's say some stuff about that. And what might we find out about the commonality or the commonness or rarity of a Jussie Smollett type situation? And by the way, it's still a mystery as to whether it was to just be an activist, to be the Black Tupac, or to also maybe parlay that primarily for getting more screen time, more notoriety, more money. Okay. The question is, why didn't he go in? And then if you ask, well, why did he go in the woke direction? He was trying to go to, why doesn't he just go super woke, right? And go that way. But super woke is complicated. Super woke is, you have to have a few brain cells. Now, the argument would go that apparently, given his actions, he's not demonstrated himself to be the most strategic reasoner. Okay. Not thinking through things completely, let's say. Okay. Maybe shooting from the hip, or maybe, filled with some kind of strange hubris, perhaps. Okay. So given those facts, he's not built for the woke game, because the woke game involves a lot of righteous indignation and subtle psychological hints at perceived slights of one kind or the other based on power dynamics that are all part of the infrastructure of phallogocentric Western male-dominated patriarchy. All that is a little bit too much for Jussie, right? He's like, I can't do that. Okay, I want to get in this woke thing. I want these woke money. I want these woke dollars. Because trust me, if there were not dollars in the woke game, it would not be what it is. There are dollars to be made. And these companies out there, a lot of these companies, are participating in it because there are dollars to be made in it. And then there are non-governmental organizations, okay, individuals who also go that direction because there are dollars, there are grants in it also, right? But anyways, back to the data.
Felony or A misdemeanor, B misdemeanor, bias attacks in a typical year. Of those, about 8 to 10%, and that's the estimate of myself, a research associate, and a police contact, 8 to 10%, are widely reported enough to even attract the attention of an ethical national researcher. So you've got, taking a high-end estimate, 700 serious nationally reported hate crimes in a year that could turn out to be hoaxes. My data set is based over a period of about 5 years. I mean, there are cases like Tawana Brawley that predate. There are a few 2019 cases on the list, as you saw. But let's say I have 500 cases within a 5-year period where you could have a max of 700 national cases in a year. You're talking about a proven false report or hoax rate of roughly 15%, which is remarkable. I will say there's a flip side to that, by the way. The other...
Let's examine that slightly, okay? Because he said some things and then he landed at 15%, right? You heard that, I heard that. Okay. He started out with 7,000 and then he came out with 15%. Now, let's see what that means.
19 cases on the list, as you saw. But let's say I have 500 cases within a 5-year period where you could have a max of 700 national cases in a year. You're talking about a proven false report or hoax rate of roughly 15%, which is...
Okay, assuming those data sets are kind of comparable, that they're kind of apples to apples in the sense that those that do get reported versus just hoaxes in general that get unearthed. But I guess, it is what it is. You have over here a set of data, that is about 15% of what is reported in a year. And you say, hey, at least I have that. Okay, which is something that also, speaking of data, people are not comfortable with just partial levels of resolution in terms of their knowledge, right? People, it's either on or off. It's either yes or no. They don't like uncertainty, right? So we're building a model here and we're saying, hey, okay, where are the error bars? Where is the plus or minus, right? The plus or minus 10%, how sure are we of this information? And as you sift through the information, again, going from the anecdotes and making the data and then comparing and looking at the groups of data, seeing if they're comparable indeed, you start to see, okay, well, this is, I'm kind of like 50% sure with this model. This is a good working model. We can use this model, right? That's basically how it should be done. Not to say, oh, no, it's either this or it's that. Oh, my data proves this. My data proves that, Wow. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Okay. Always supporting out here. Taboo Smash. 4.99 super chat. Right? And we'll talk about that question that you raised right there. It's a very good question. Deserves to be right up there. Okay? Speaking about the woke narrative and why perhaps someone like Jussie Smollett would not go into it, because that is something that directly tells us about the nature of modern day racism and the modern day racist game. The modern day racist game is psychologically subtle, and you have to play certain subtle games in order to be in it. And perhaps Jussie Smollett's trial and fumbling of the ball with regards to just some blatantly outward old style silly noose and stuff like that, like stark contrasts indeed, ladies and gentlemen. So 15% so far is what we're seeing. 15% so far is what we have heard. All right. Do you think the woke narrative is sustainable money-wise and culture-wise. Okay. Perhaps we can take a slight pause here after having looked at the percentages of hate crime hoaxes, and we shall continue to see what then shall we do about how we look at hate crimes. What then should there be an attitude shift if we do have some data as to the prevalence of hoaxes? Should there be a shift in our attitudes? Would go to question. Is that not a fair question, A. Hill? Is it not a fair question to ask? If I start getting data into this and I start solidifying the data, should I not be loosening perhaps some preconceived notions as to how I viewed these hate crimes that were reported either on the media or that I hear about or that ends up in lawsuits or part of insurance claims and are adjudicated in one way or the other, arbitrated in boardrooms somewhere that you don't get to see? Right? The sustainability of. So let's do this, okay? Taboo smash. This is the question that you ask is a good one to address via abstracting from first principles, I guess, to the degree that we can. And when you're abstracting from first principles, lo-fi music is what you do, right? Can I get a one in the chat if I'm correct about that? When you're going to answer a question such as, is the woke narrative sustainable, either money-wise or culture-wise? And you're going to abstract from first principles, you got to play lo-fi music, right? Indeed. And I see another super chat in the building. Shout out to you. So now basically, what does the woke narrative represent? The woke narrative represents, okay, in money-wise, first of all, okay, why does the money attach itself to it? So the model that we're building here, it says, look, there's this thing called the woke narrative. Okay, we all know what it is. It's a set of ideas, right? Let's just call it like that. Just tag it with that. You know what it is, set of ideas. It's out there. We're saying that there's dollars in it, okay? So the dollar people could attach themselves to those set of ideas. And we're saying, well, why will it work? Because if you're asking if it's sustainable, you need to ask, well, how does it even work to begin with? Okay? Why would it work? Why would it be the case that they can say these things and it'll work? Well, basically, the woke narrative represents something, a surface level, and it's about who controls the narrative of the time. And you can sell your Mercedes-Benz with whatever narrative is of the time. Let me put it this way. Whatever it is the narrative that's going on by a select group of people who will put themselves in these particular positions, and there are these organs of sense-making that are out there, where it be the universities and the media, to speak of just these two, right? Downstream from which many things come, right? But these institutions are interested now, because we've shifted now over to the cultural side. We've talked about why money can attach itself to it. Money will attach itself to it because those are the people that are controlling the sheep. And when I say controlling the sheep, it's not a question of being conspiratorial. It's just a question of mammalian nature. It's just the way we are, right? Everyone is in a box. Everyone is in a cave. Everyone is in a code, a system, a matrix of their own. So there's going to be big group matrix or big group matrix out there that is a result again of this sense making organs, the universities, blah blah blah, whatever you may say, and they're pushing this woke agenda for certain other reasons, which have nothing to do with the fact that money can always just come in and attach itself to any big narrative, and then you can sell your forks, your knives, your spoons, and your deodorants based on that narrative. So is it sustainable for money? It doesn't matter for money, because money will come in and glom itself onto the next narrative. Does that make sense, Taboo Smash? Can I get a one? Can I get a yes or no? Can I get a pushback? If this particular quasi reasoning from first principles with regards to the nature of how the woke narrative works and how money can be made from it, right? We basically said, hey, it's not about the narrative itself. It's about a particular group of elites that can control the sheep engines at the time. And you can always make money by putting your billboards in front of the sheep engine of the time. So goes the narrative. And with that, lo-fi minute is gone. That's a new segment, Taboo Smash. Okay. What else we got there? There is another super chat in the building that I must now acknowledge. Okay. Thank you very much. I believe that is another $5. Says, salute, my brother. Zion the Dawn. 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 If the follow-up question to the question of how the wokeness, whether it be, because I didn't answer the cultural part, by the way, whether it's sustainable culturally, because that's a longer conversation about whether or not you think that wokeness is a symptom or a cause. In other words, is wokeness if you're talking about cultural degradation, okay, on Taboo Smash, if you're talking about cultural degradation, then there's going to be many layers which can be considered just symptoms and reflections of something that may be more core to the destruction of the culture. So you have to first of all look and clearly agree whether or not this whole wokeness thing is just an epiphenomenon, just a reflection or just a symptom, as opposed to being a root cause vis-a-vis the corroding of the societal such and such. So let's continue here with the numbers. We've gotten to 15%. 15% of hate crime hoaxes. Possibly 15% out there of the things that you hear are hoaxes. Okay. Then that's just the hoax part. But how about the kind of maybe exaggerations? There are levels to lies. So straight hoax, 15%. How many more points do we get for the exaggerations? Maybe another 10%, right? For hyperbole, for maybe adding a little bit of salt and pepper to strong arm something because, someone's going to settle out of court, that kind of a situation. Maybe a little extra fires with hate crime slurs written on the wall to get that sweet insurance money. But, ladies and gentlemen, let's see. Let's continue here. Let's interrogate further this 15%. Thank you. Once again, like, share, subscribe.
Is remarkable. I will say there's a flip side to that, by the way. The other 85% of the cases do not end in a criminal prosecution and a conviction. The conviction rate, and I need to do more vetting on this, we're both academics, but the conviction rate in hate crime cases seems to be about 6%. Looking at the data from those states where that is available, California, Iowa, what you find, taking California 2016 data, being as specific as possible, in that year, there were 931 claimed felony or a misdemeanor hate assaults, hate attacks. Of those, only 220 were even referred to the prosecutor, which is a very basic standard, meaning we have any kind of suspect, and this case isn't a hoax. There were, if I recall correctly, as always, this show and elsewhere, I welcome clarification, there were 51 convictions. So out of 1,000 cases, roughly, you had 50 to 60 convictions. That's pretty typical. So, I mean, if you apply those numbers to 3,500 cases over 5 years, if you say 500 hoaxes, you would assume between, say, 175 and 350 actual convictions. So the rate to which hate crimes turn out to be hoaxes or to be false is extremely high. The conviction rate is extremely low.
Okay.
Okay. So speaking now of convictions, because we've talked about the anecdote and we've talked about the data, and we're saying, hey, how common is the Jussie Smollett phenomenon? Is he an outlier? What kind of numbers are out there with regards to these hate crimes that we hear about? What percentages are hoaxes? And he has given us a few numbers, the reports of actual hoaxes that are found out through some process of adjudication. But then he also talked about convictions, a low conviction rate when it actually goes to criminal court, I assume in this case, right? Well, let's not assume. We'll go back and we'll listen and make sure. But criminal court, low conviction rate, high rate of falsehoods and fakes. And remember, we already gave plausible reasons as to why this faking might occur, right? Because we started from Jussie and we say, hey, this is done. Other people do this. By asking, well, why would Jussie do it? Well, we know about Munchausen syndrome, which is that thing that makes it such that some people want to hurt themselves or hurt others for attention. Just another kind of little thing under the umbrella of attention seeking. We saw financial motivations for insurance. We think there might be financial motivations for Jussie Smollett, for example, right? So we start to look at the numbers, the conviction rates. And we start to understand the nature of what is going on, says he. What does that even mean? Well, let's continue. Let's see. Let's interrogate further this.
You apply those numbers to 3,500 cases over 5 years. If you say 500 hoaxes, you would assume between, say, 175 and 350 actual convictions. So the rate to which hate crimes turn out to be hoaxes or to be false is extremely high. The conviction rate is extremely low.
Okay, hold on. I want to make sure I got these numbers right. Taking the universe of reported hate crimes, where's that come from? The FBI?
Yeah, that's FBI data.
Okay, hold on. Taking the universe and then cutting it down because you want to look only at those that would have gotten some national attention, that would have been high profile enough. So that's going to be a certain percentage of those. And then comparing that to the number of hoaxes that you can document. You've done that over a period of years, but you're going to kind of prorate those over an annual basis to come up with a number like between 10 and 15% of the significantly reported hate crimes are hoaxes. Did I get that correct? Because I just want to get the facts here. Is that accurate?
That's a good quick synopsis. Yeah, a little under 15% of nationally reported hate crimes in the study period turned out to be hoaxes.
Okay.
Proven.
Now, in addition to that, you want to then look at the conviction rate of crimes that actually get into court. And you're saying that it's lower than one would expect it to be if the factual basis for the claim of having been the victim of hate crime were not false. Again, I want you to clarify that. How are you using the information about conviction rates?
Essentially, you're using that as a comparison metric or a null hypothesis metric relative to the rate of hoaxes. All I'm saying here, obviously not all hate crimes are hoaxes. I don't think anyone.
I think we got the bodies in the morgue to make that point.
Yes, unfortunately, there are very real mass shootings. I do want to emphasize, I think there's a tendency on both the left and the right to take words out of context in the political debate and so on.
Yeah.
Obviously, I'm not a supporter of hate crime. I don't even know. I think there are real hate crimes. We need to punish real hate criminals. What I'm saying here is that this is an area where you appear to have a roughly 15% complete hoax, falsification rate, at least among prominent cases, and where you appear to have a, let's say, less than 10% conviction rate. So the argument that there is an unchallenged epidemic of hate crimes, these are not fakes, these result in a conviction, these result in a death, that is not accurate. And I think that's one of the major points of the book. This ties into...
Okay. So there's a quantitative aspect to his, what I mean is just a quantitative gravity, and a massing gravity aspect. In other words, he's saying, hey, the numbers are not even actually really there. Because if you look at the fakes, and then if you look at the low conviction rate, it's like, well, it doesn't seem like the numbers are there. One could argue, though, what would be the pushbacks? What are possible pushbacks? How could we interrogate and shake up this idea that he's putting out here? Because one could say, hey, well, people are not necessarily reporting the real hate crimes. Could it be that there's an underreporting of real hate crimes and an overreporting of false hate crimes? Does that hold water? Okay, can you help me out in the chat here? Is it possible? Can I get a 1 in the chat? Is it possible that people are underreporting the real hate crimes and over-reporting fake ones? That perhaps there's a loud minority kind of muddying up the water with their fake hate crimes, perhaps? Is that a plausible argument for looking at the broad data if you look at countrywide and whatnot? I'm not sure. Okay, I'm not sure. I don't know. But apparently he's saying that there's no gravity there. There's no mass there. You don't see this epidemic of hate crimes. And the numbers that you do see end up with 15% false and a low conviction rate for those that do end up in court. All right.
Too, by the way, and I think we'll get more into this, but a larger question about how accurate this narrative of massive ethnic conflict is. So when you look,
hold on, I don't want you to go on to another point just yet. Thank you. I mean, I definitely want to hear about the general question about the narrative, but I'm still trying to parse the issue of the quantity, and how much of it is invalid, and what we should make of that. Because with respect, I'm not sure you answered my question, and my question was, allowing for the possibility that a certain number of these reports are fake, should that change our general disposition toward the issue of racially or religiously motivated?
The question we asked earlier, right? The question we asked earlier, what should our position, how should we smell these cases now? How should we look at them? Right? Should we give them a side glance now or not? Or shall we say, is this a hot button issue or less of a hot button issue? Is this something you try to prioritize more or less based on the facts? And perhaps there are more facts, more numbers to support one way or the other. Because I do not yet see anything yet that would change my attitudes towards whether or not hate crime was a quote unquote problem, whether there was a prevalence or a preponderance or a weightiness, gravity, a number that it will be an issue. But let's see.
Criminal victimization, because people are definitely on the alert. I mean, there is talk about an epidemic of hate crimes. Evidently, you think that's false. You think there's an epidemic of hoaxes, not an epidemic of hate crimes. But, that church in Charleston, South Carolina, everybody remembers what happened when the gunman went in there, Dylan Ruth, if I remember the man's name correctly, and shot up that church. And so on. Okay, churches are getting burned, right? I mean, that's really happening some places sometimes. There's the threat of domestic terrorism motivated by right-wing, white nationalists, whatever, would appear to be a real threat, isn't it? Should we be thinking differently about these threats in virtue of your research? How do you want the narrative to go this time?
I think that's a purely mathematical question, Glenn. I mean, yes, obviously, to some extent, if out of a category of cases that are normally all treated as though they were real and resulted in criminal prosecutions, 90% did not result in criminal prosecutions or convictions, and 20%, 15%, let's say, turn out to be false, yes, that should change our estimate of how much epidemic danger there is out there. Many or most, by the way, this among the most high profile cases, by the way, I have not yet calculated this using modern empirical methods, but the false reporting rate must be much higher. If you look at Jussie Smollett, Covington Catholic, Yasmin Saweed, Kean College, Eastern Michigan, the young black woman in Grand Rapids that claimed she was literally urinated on, many of the cases that have produced street marches, Air Force Academy, where a general came to the campus to speak against racism.
Sounds like a party. Okay. So, an epidemic of hoaxes or an epidemic of hate crimes. Okay. So, these are two stark positions, starkly different positions. It's not a in between, minute in the gray dispute here. He's saying, no, there's just a bunch of hoaxes. 15% fake, 90% not leading to convictions. What will be our anecdotal experience, for example? Someone talks about the South, but also referencing the past, important things about the nature of racism and crime these days, which is something that we're touching about and touching upon by looking at this relevant current data, but also by noting that Jussie Smollett could not play the modern day race victim game because it takes verbal acuity and some sense. So the woke game kind of weeds out the low level idiot would be race victims. We can at least give them that, right? What will be our own anecdotal experience with regards to these things occurring in the workplace, occurring in our families, occurring in amongst friends and associates and friends of friends? You know, people talking about, is it true that, for example, forget hate crime, is it true that as a black man you cannot get a taxi cab in New York? Is that true? Can I get a yes in the chat? Because I've heard a couple of things about that people that's not true. You know, you can get a taxi cabs and not just driving past black people. And that's some kind of hoax. See, I lived in New York for about a year, but not in the I didn't do taxi cabs. I was this was when I was 18 years old, so. But it is said black man can't get taxi cab. And I wonder what exactly is the data on that, as opposed to the story. Because if you talk about hoaxes, that's an easy one to hoax about, right? You want to feel important in a cocktail party, want to win an argument, want to pull out the ace, right? Like, boom, I was in New York today, couldn't get a cab. Boom, case closed, shut down, you won. But I might be generous, right? If that's just being not generous, might be generous and give you the case that yes, okay, this is your experience that you're not getting cabs in New York. What does it say? What does it say? Okay, so he's saying we should change our attitudes. Okay, let's play a little bit more of this. Okay, and then maybe we'll continue next time, and we'll continue next time reviewing this video. Okay, maybe I'll make a part 1, part 2 thing or something like that. But Jussie Smollett today got convicted, or not convicted, he got sentenced. He got convicted a while ago for faking a hate crime. Yes, Chicago police caught him with the Oshundairo brothers, Yoruba boys, Nigerian boys out there faking a crime, buying bleach, buying rope, talking about MAGA country and all that kind of stuff. 150 days in Cook County Jail, ladies and gentlemen. Now, what does this tell us? It tells us a few things. We ask, why did he do this? We said, hey, maybe he's trying to advance his career. Maybe he's trying to be an activist. After all, he does kind of look at himself as the quote unquote gay Tupac, of which someone said Tupac is probably laughing in his grave. Well, he may want to be an activist. But in general, how many people do this Munchausen thing? And how many people do it for financial reasons? And then we started looking at the data. Okay. We started looking at the data we looked at anecdotes. We talked about the different motivations. And we got to 15% by looking at 500 and 7,000. And we started talking about conviction rates as well for those that make it to court. And let's get a few more minutes and then we'll see where we're at. We'll see where we're at. And along the way, by the way, Taboo Smash came in, asked a question about the cultural sustainability of the woke narrative. And I said, well, that'll depend on whether or not it's a root cause or just a reflection. Of which something I'm not particularly sure of, because some people will This is a perennial argument. Some people like to say that the ideas of the times are the problems of the times. Do you understand what I'm saying, ladies and gentlemen? Right? Some people say, oh, it's the ideas that is corrupting the people. And some others say, no, the people are corrupted by other things, material conditions, such as maybe the economy or the internet, P-Hub, right? All kinds of other things, being disconnected because of capitalism, blah, blah, blah. And then these ideas that come out of them or the ideas that they gravitate towards is just a reflection. Okay. It's not that people heard something and all of a sudden they're becoming corrupt. They're already corrupt. They're corrupted by other conditions, more material conditions, material, economic, perhaps geopolitical, power based, blah, blah, blah. Right. So there's always that argument of a history moving as a result of more economic, geopolitical, technological reasons, political reasons, and maybe great man type reasons, like, oh no, it was because of this king or because of this. And then also there's the idea realm that, oh, it was because of the ideas of Voltaire and the Enlightenment. That's why these things happened. Or people say, well, no, it was those things were happening. And therefore Voltaire said what he said. So that's always the question. So that question needs to be looked at when you're talking about wokeness and whether or not it's culturally sustainable, because you have to ask, well, what exactly is really going on beneath the surface? And is wokeness really, shall we say, decisive, foundational, fundamental, more of a root cause? So let's see.
Epidemic danger there is out there. Many or most, by the way, this among the most high profile cases, by the way, I have not yet calculated this using modern empirical methods, but the false reporting rate must be much higher. If you look at Jussie Smollett, Covington Catholic, Yasmin Saweed, Kean College, Eastern Michigan, the young black woman in Grand Rapids that claimed she was literally urinated on, many of the cases that have
Yeah, that one sounds like a party.
Produced street marches, Air Force Academy, where a general came to the campus to speak against racism, the burning of Hopewell Baptist, the most famous of the churches you just cited. Every one of those cases is a proven hoax, and most appear in the book. So, yes, if you, going through the first 10 pages of Google, standard empirical analysis, how many mainstream media stories about each case took place, if out of the 10 highest profile hate cases in the country, which provoked major marches, 7 turn out to be fakes, yes, that should empirically affect our analysis of how much of a threat hate crimes are. That doesn't mean that when a hate crime incident takes place, it shouldn't be investigated, an alleged hate crime incident. That doesn't mean that if the incident turns out to be a fake, we shouldn't imprison or fry the guy involved. But it does mean, and this is true of a lot of areas of intense media focus, by the way, like young child kidnapping. It does mean that if we look at the real numbers and there's not much of a threat, we should tone down the panic. Barry Glassner and the culture of...
Okay, good. So let's move slightly on as we land the plane. Okay. What are the dangers of this particular landscape? Because we've painted so far a very kind of soft, easy racial landscape, saying, hey, you know what? Not a big deal when it comes to these particular hate crimes. There's a lot of hoaxes, not a high conviction rate, Jussie Smollett, those kinds of things. It's not easy to play the race victim these days. Well, actually, it is easy. It's just a different level now because it's more subtle, more psychological, more by microaggression and white privilege and all these kinds of subtle things. And Jussie was not particularly cut out for that. He's not the sharpest tool in the shed, obviously. Okay. But now let's move on from that to how this can actually be a bad situation. This wokeness situation might be more of a powder keg and more of a dangerous thing than the opposite. Okay? Because one could say, hey, well, let me not put words in his mouth. And let's see what he would have to say about something like that. Because I think it's timestamped here on the video that I'm looking at. I'm thinking, okay, well, let me play a little bit of that. But I have some my ideas as well as to why the woke style racial politics is actually more dangerous than just straight up in your face, more overt racial politics, right? Because one thing could be said, at least you can see the overt ones. And, if the Confederate flag is out there, yeah, let it be out there. Don't hide your Confederate flag, right? So goes that particular line here. But let's see, because, we've looked at the data somewhat. Let's see about how the.
I think that so first of all, obviously, you're right. The media is generally sensationalistic.
Right.
The media, except for long form conversations like this one, perhaps, is an ad delivery vehicle. So the things that appear on Fox News or CNN are those things that sell Chevy Silverados and Viagra pills. There seems to be a set grouping of things that people are afraid of, excited by, and that will pay attention to. The risks of sex and sexuality and also of parenthood, the atavistic terror of being eaten by an animal, things bursting into flames, racial conflict, blacks and whites fighting in the street with sticks. We all know the 7 or 8 things the media talks about all the time. So sensationalism is real. I also do think the media in the United States, along with most of the discursive sector, leans left. I'm not a radical partisan. I'm center to center right myself, but this is just a fact. We've all seen the Pew 2004 data. 93% of mass media journalists test as liberals or left-leaning moderates. So I think that in the context of those Pew results, one of the things you see very often in the media is this narrative of extreme ethnic conflict. So Black Lives Matter openly says, this is in the platform of the movement for Black Lives, that police kill between thousands and tens of thousands of essentially innocent Black people every year.
We know that's false.
Yeah, it's wildly.
More like 250 or something like that.
Yes, yeah.
If they're innocent.
Some are innocent.
Thousands to tens of thousands. That seems a little wild. And then the real number is 250. And then Glenn Lowry says, if they're innocent. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, I think that I don't want to keep these too long. Okay. All right. Unless somebody wants to pull up on the panel. Right. Unless someone has something to say. But I don't see you super chatting. So you guys are not very you guys are not doing a lot of conversing. Not very conversational down there. But I will drop the link. Well, much appreciated, ladies and gentlemen, being here thus far. So again, Jussie Smollett, born 1982. I think June. He's going to turn 40 today. Not today, this year. He'll be 40. 40-year-old singer and actor, acclaimed actor in Empire, playing Jamal. And Jamal was seen as a groundbreaking role portraying a gay Black man in television. And he faked a hate crime along with 2 Nigerians. And it was rather comical how he did it and how he lied on TV about it. And he got charged. The Chicago police did not appreciate being lied to. He is sentenced to 150 days in jail. What does that tell us? What does that bring to mind about race relations, the racial game, the racial identity / victimization game in modern times? Okay. Well, why would he do that? Well, we know that we know the numbers that many people do that. Many people hoax things. What will be the motivation? Well, attention, Munchausen syndrome, money. Burn down my restaurant, put hate slurs in there and say, pay me, Mr. Insurance Company. Perhaps notoriety in the case of Jussie Smollett wanting to be an activist and whatnot. Okay? These things are valid motivations. And then we looked at the stats of actually how many people take advantage of these motivations. All the while noting that the fact that he had to do this means that there have been changes in race relations and the manner of what racism and the racist game looks like now. And it involves more subtle things that our friend Jussie Smollett just could not get into. Hello there.
Hello.
Do you mind introducing yourself?
Aylin. A Hill.
A Hill. And what do you have for us?
Oh, well, I came in late, so I don't feel comfortable about the discussion between the two gentlemen. But I did watch the trial or the sentencing yesterday, and I have been thinking about hoaxes as far as crime and legalities. And there's been a strain of that. I think there's been a strain, especially around the start of BLM, which for me in the beginning really, I attached that with socialism and guerrilla theater.
Now, interesting. Now, would you mind elucidating that guerrilla theater part there?
I think, well, guerrilla theater itself is a practice of exemplifying scenarios of public behavior, social behavior, in front of public audiences and public spaces in order to influence thought around those behaviors.
So what particular behaviors were put out there, and what was the thought that's trying to be influenced, or what are the desired outcomes in this?
Well, for me, being Black and having been in the circles that BLM grew out of, I would have thought I would have been able to anticipate BLM in a way. I have been in those circles, but not, but I would say I was employed by those circles. I was not a part of the class that BLM was, right? And I was not a part of the ethnicity as BLM was. So for me, it had the footprint of an initiative, of what is sometimes a philanthropic initiative. And it had the footprint of bureaucracy. It had a footprint of the bourgeoisie, to me, in a sense, because there was no connection with Black communities. There was no connection with class in Black communities. And there was no little booklet in the back pocket to tell you what the agenda was. And so the behaviors of BLM, people around me, other Black Americans in my circle, sort of watched them and said, do you know these people? No, I don't want to know these people. Oh, they're out. You better not go out there and protest. You don't know what these people are doing.
Now, when I hear that, I hear something a little bit like I hear, because there are two choices. There's one choice may be, well, there are at least these two, right? One choice may be there is some kind of evil motive behind it, some grand strategic hidden hand, or it could just be something banal.
It could be a hustle.
Exactly. Just like a banal middle class hustle.
Yeah. Yeah, it was a hustle.
No big deal.
Just like Jussie was a hustle. We all knew that night at 2:00 in the morning, it was a hustle.
Interesting. Now, when you came in, you mentioned that you came in late, so you're not too comfortable with what was going on with the conversation. But basically, one of the points that was made by the gentleman was that you can infer about a 15% hoax ratio on hate crimes, just based on some numbers that he gathered, and that there are many reasons for this, whether it be for financial gain or and what have you, and that there are very low rates of convictions when things actually do go to court. So now he's saying, okay, the race relations, or shall we say, the hoax epidemic is not real. You also mentioned in the beginning that there was no, you mentioned the Black community, like the real community, right? And some detached entity that we were discussing, right?
Right.
What are the real concerns in the real community? If Jussie Smollett is a hoax, if the BLM stuff is just middle class hustle, then what is going down there? Will I call them the proletariat if I were to use your language?
Well, it really depends on the circles. I mean, we have different circles in our community. You know, we have our bourgeoisie. I grew up among the bourgeoisie. My family was the only family with 3 different families living in the same house in an upper middle class neighborhood, right? And they had their circles, which you do not pierce. You may have conversations that may be helpful, but you definitely will not be. No doors will be open. No elbows will be rubbed, and no palms will be smooth. Okay. Then you have you had us, who we were just working class people. You know, my grandmother was half Mexican, so she was working as an assistant buyer. You know, we had different trades, we had different jobs, and we worked together to keep our homes together. And to be quite honest, for our history, Black people have been trying to make it day by day, right? And among ourselves, we had a block association. We did have a public leader who turned out to be a little something, named Eric Holder, you know. So, but he was of that other class. You know what I mean? So we had, when you talk about representational politics, that draws from that class of people, or that draws from someone like me who's ambitious and aligns themselves with the politics in that circle. But the on the ground folks ourselves, you may have some activism here and there, you may have some groups here and there, but you are working within your means. You are working on the job, or you are working unemployed, or you are working trying to make it. But your voice in the political arena is very slim.
So almost by necessity, by definition, you know, representational democracy is going to take from a particular strata. Okay, now it. Would you mind how rigid is that? In other words, when I look at that fact, I see again something else, perhaps maybe just kind of that can be easily flipped.
Yeah.
Because it's kind of it's not like they're a particularly effective bunch, or whatever game is going on is I think, for example, you know, and this may be a reach, but take for example what Putin is doing. I think it kind of shows the overall silliness of what we think we got going on here among certain people, right? And that over here, like it's like professional wrestling, you know, pro wrestling, WWF, you know, WWE, you know, the Hulk Hogan and everything. But over in other places in the real world, MMA is actually going on. So
Yeah.
it seems like this whole, but I guess there is a question in there as to, well, how could that thing be flipped? How could it be made such that maybe representation of democracy, you're saying might be the problem, but
Right.
how could it be made such that you're not always getting the quote unquote bourgeoisie, the wannabe upper whatever, and the particular class? Yeah.
Because there is a strain between the two. And actually, it is said, and I've been reading before I came in here, which is why I was late, about an actual political strain between Democrats and Ukraine. And Democrats historically have had a way, you know, we're segregated in education over here, right? I was bused to school. I had a upper class satellite school for math and sciences in kindergarten. That's the track I was supposed to be on, and then I was bused to public school, so that ruined me. You know, it worked backwards because it doesn't work that way for most people. Most people aren't in middle class Black neighborhoods. Most people are where they are, and the way that we have all been taught, and most importantly, the way that the media has framed us, like I was speaking about Wakanda and woke. Well, that's America pastime. That's comes from a birth. That's a strain from birth of a nation, you know, and the way that we are socialized and fed media to understand ourselves and race and understand our place in the world. You know, when I first got out there in education and work, it was often said to me, "You should know your place. You're getting too comfortable." Being the only Black person there, so we knew our place, and we made ourselves comfortable. So now and that was done by Democrats, which we now are sick of. Everybody's sick of a Democrat right now. So what they've done all of these years is they've played to not only identity, but they've said there are people out there who have interests, who have a say. And now they say, we are doing the work, and that is the work we do. But that never amounts to anything. There is no continuity. There is no strategy. There is no evaluation. There is no measure. There is campaigning. Each term, there's campaigning. So from all of that, I have to say, when I watched that sentencing from beginning to end, and in the end, there was a news conference. And in the end of that, almost there was Jussie Smollett's grandmother, who is Polish-Russian. Russian-Polish, I should say. And she says, we have to save our democracy. If we do not, we will get another Putin. And she says, that one is for film. Her grandson has just been sentenced for going to jail for a hoax on racism, and he knows nothing what it is to be Black. And she's campaigning and looking forward to the media. Her little talking point in the film about what is happening and what was generated.
Now, it seems perhaps there is no measure that you were talking about earlier. You said there is no measure, no metrics, just campaigning. And perhaps that is the case because there is nothing that can be done about certain realities. And unless and until perhaps, okay.
Well,
and
no.
Okay.
We will not say that. Because there's
It's
economics.
certain realities.
There's economics. Okay? And I have experience in this, okay? I have experienced this in the nonprofit world where I went as a secretary, and because nobody wanted to do it, I ended up building databases about funding. And in these databases, I wanted to measure communities. Who lives in communities? How much do they make? How old are they? Are they educated? You know, you can measure those things, and you can certainly, I'm even beyond that, because we're not in the point, we're in such debt as a country. We obviously haven't measured our country at the macro level. So there are measures to be made. And that should be a part of governance, I think. I mean, I thought that should be a standard. I don't know. Does anybody do that? I guess not.
There's a lot of lying with regards to the quote unquote the measures, especially the official numbers of whatever. Always lie, you know.
Yeah, it's
And
lying.
as but also, you know, perhaps remarkably, the truth about the numbers is there, and this is what I was saying, that you could perhaps there's nothing that can be done about. Like, there's this layer of a lie, right? Below that layer, not so far removed from that layer, you can find the quasi truth about it. In other words, you can find, okay, what's behind this number? It's like, oh, this number is adjusted for this, and this, so it doesn't really mean that, right? And then even below that, you could still find, maybe out here on YouTube, right, somebody telling you a cleaner level of the truth. But the problem is, the majority of people are always going to stay somewhere at the surface level lie, or not even paying any attention at all, right? Because the truth is not necessarily very far hidden, right?
Yeah. I'm forgetting the name of the author because I'm a little. I read early. I read at 3, and I didn't read persistently, but I would pick things up and read it. Like I read Iceberg Slim, and I also read the Moynihan Report. Right. A lot of the data, before there was data, there was pathology. We were pathologized before there was data. The data proved the pathology. And that's how we started off, you know. So, and the pathology always leads. It's the easiest thing to do, you know. So I don't necessarily think that, I think we have to get past a lot of the narrative and the framing of us before we can even begin to get to the truth of the data and the numbers.
Quick question: you watched that sentencing, and earlier on we were talking about the possible motives of the Jussie. And shout out to the super chat here, because the super chatter does have a question about the motivations of Jussie, the first black gay superhero. In other words, do you think there was a money / career notoriety motivation, or was it more of a I want to be an activist, just want some attention type stuff? A mixture of both.
I don't think it was only Jussie. I think that it was a campaign. For me, it was a kickoff for BLM and a kickoff for the next campaign. That's the way I saw it. And just all of the defense around it. When I looked at the cast of characters around the defense, it really seemed like and the just the stupidity of it, you know, just the plain not knowing but carrying it out seems like, well, we know we should throw this little gig, we should throw this little thing, this guerrilla theater thing. And yeah, you know what? He should have a noose around his neck. That'll really do it, you know? Because what was the purpose, really? The purpose of having a noose around your neck in the urban area, where were they going to hang him? So I don't know. I think that I see that as just the same old code, identity politics. And triggers that you push by claiming identities, and that own trigger, just like I say with Wakanda. You know, the new media speaks not to the audience; it speaks to the individual, the identities in the black, gay, white. It speaks to what they know, what they hold to heart. Wakanda said, we have the new African. Let's speak to the new African. And how is the African American going to feel about that? And you know what? It's going to make other immigrants feel real good too. And all of these feelings are swimming in their own juice, you know? Well, I think it's the same thing about the Black and gay superhero. It's going to push this new favored group on the totem pole, you know. It's going to usher in Africans as the new Black. Because as long as I've lived, and I've lived with Africans since I was young, Nigerians, I've never heard an African call themselves Black. And I was almost at the point where I would not call myself Black because I was encouraged not to do so, you know? So this is really a new generation of Africans calling themselves Black. And something has to happen to solidify that.
That's interesting. I heard that recently there's a push now from some far corner to remove the word Negro. You know, the word Negro is the next to be canceled. And I do recall having a conversation with an African American woman back in college about the Negro thing. It came up just out of the blue because I was saying something about Negro, and she was kind of offended or taken aback or something. And then I started wondering, like, what do you mean? Like, because I was reading this book by is it Andrew Young? And you know, and they're using the word Negro and Nigga, you know, Martin Luther King, and you know, talking. And I thought, you know, Negro, if you go back to the root of the word, that's Black, Latin, whatever, right? Like, why would it be an offensive thing? And then there's this politics, or one may say, you know, preoccupation with what I will be called this decade or this next 5 years. What will be my name? Will I be Black? Will I be African American?
Well, that's it, because
will I be offended?
We are categorized in this country. We were named. We were colored. I was raised by my great-grandmother and her sister and my grandmother. And they used color. Walter Plecker gave us color. And that was socialized. And that's what we were at the time. And then we became Negro. We didn't choose these things. And then we became Black. And then we became African American. And now we call each other whatever we will. We're figuring that out again, you know? But if I know my family's history, pretty far back. I won't go into it because you don't have that kind of time. And I know that that we had a new African on my paternal side. We had a great new African, and I know that there was a distinction between us when he came to. I know that, and that distinction remained. But yeah, that it is insulting to us because we get these names and we rationalize adopting them, and the world knows us by them, and then they change again. So you don't want to go back.
We'll be back here tomorrow, by the way. And
I'm Black too, Dr. Thunder. So am I.
This was something else that I got into it with the African American lady too, about the Black, because there is Black, right, in terms of skin color, which is kind of generally accepted as, okay, well, in Africa, like, well, Black, you know, Black skin, you know, Blacks over there. But I did not realize how much Black was an African American word. When in America, when you say Black, you're not talking about skin color per se. You're talking about ADOS.
A categorization. We have been literally, and still are literally, categorized by the country. And I don't even like to call myself Black. Afro sometimes. And still, these are all terms that we did not define and do not define us.
And as people see their caramel colored sons, you know, of mixed heritage and such go into the future, one might wonder what all this is.
That's
all
a little
about.
questionable.
It's not going to happen. We're not going to mix all into one nice cream.
I'm saying it's questionable because, you know, my family is from the Sea Islands, and we're red. We're, you know, and I'll tell you, my great was Bilali Muhammad, and he came from Guinea. And when he arrived, he was supposed to be fighting off the British, but they never came. And that's why I think it's a hoax. Okay, so he said, "I will not fight with those Christian dogs." I don't believe he said Christian, but I know he saw, and he married my great grandmother anyway. But I know he saw us as different, as lighter than, and I know that we weren't from Africa if he came from Guinea and called us some dogs. So that has always been what I gathered from the statement. And it remains to be, I mean, you have to keep digging, but, you know, we're people, who we are has been hidden. And it's very easy to do when people don't want to think about it. It's just very simple. They're just black, right? They dance and they sing, they play basketball, and they entertain. But who we were back then and our mixture, the effect of our mixture, the effect of Bilali Muhammad is not really known. And that matters.
Those are your last words for the day?
I guess it'll have to be. You don't have all night, do you?
Indeed. And I was saying, you know, come through tomorrow. We'll be having a conversation about what is it? Mental slavery. Okay, mental slavery, a trope. Okay, how can we distinguish between mental slavery from all other kinds of sheepish behavior? Is it individually induced? Is it something that is hoisted upon you from without? And is it just another one of these vague babbles that people say just to not say anything and to feel like they're part and they're with it and they're saying the right things? It's like the outdated woke language. But anyways, ladies and gentlemen, and thank you again, Ahil, for showing up. Welcome back anytime.
Thank you so much.
Welcome.
Take you up on that.
Ladies and gentlemen, okay, Jussie Smollett. Hate crime hoaxes, 15%. Gonna leave you with these two sentences, okay? Hate crime hoaxes. About 15% of hate crimes turn out to be hoaxes. Reasons why? Well, insurance fraud, attention, money, Munchausen syndrome. Many reasons why people do that psychologically. For those that go into court, almost 90% don't lead to convictions. So what does this teach us about the fomenting of certain narratives within the media? What are the dangers of this kind of getting us embroiled in certain kinds of fantasies? The fact that the media does it that's their business. They're going to sell what bleeds. Okay? However, there are real effects. Okay? And by the way, my favorite observation so far is that, you know, in this conversation is that it takes a certain kind of resourcefulness to play the modern day racial victim. You got to play the woke game, and the woke game comes with subtle psychological stuff, right? And Jussie Smollett was not smart enough to do the whole white privilege game and the microaggression game and all the mental gymnastics that it takes to play the woke game. So he tried a silly little thing that went nowhere. But Ahil said that perhaps it was just the beginning of a campaign. And this was not necessarily about Jussie. They're just powers behind playing simple bourgeois middle class games for money and power to get certain Democrats in office. Just that simple, again, ladies and gentlemen. And thank you very much for the super chatters. Thank you very much for those that you shared your thoughts in the chat. Those of you who called in, a hail. And we will be here again tomorrow for Case Closed. Case Closed with Dr. Thunder. We got Ramil. We got Dana with the data, and we're going to be talking about mental slavery. What is it? Okay, what is it? Peace.
In the den of iniquity, vicinity no pretty, calamity fi hit we any moment, what a pity. Tomorrow never certain, what dwells behind the curtain, the face of evil smirking with the shifty eyes averting. It's not a steady bubble, that either pop or topple, many will fall and stumble, let the dozers gather rubble. From LA to Colorado, Guinea to Burkina Faso, cannons could breach the towers and the troops will storm the castle. Hey, I say, run, run, come, make we get it. Because the peace that is bestowed upon the meek is overrated. So run, run, come, make we get it. Calling all your daughters and your sons, we come forget it. I say, run, run, come, make we get it. Because the peace that is bestowed upon the meek is overrated. Lord, run, run, come, make we get it. Calling all your daughters and your sons, we come forget it. With the rubble steady rising, and hearts are compromising. Convictions here are stifling, making evil appetizing. The fists are steady forming, and countenance is falling. Defenses are withdrawing, possibilities are falling. In these your circumstances, evil will make advances. Pick up your sword and lances, and be sure to take your stances. Victory is never promised, the battle is upon us. Gather the brave and honest, and the righteous in your corners.